Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. This is where we talk about everything firearms related, Second Amendment advocacy, movies, politics, you name it, all relating to the Second Amendment and firearms. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in and being a part of our discussion. Please make it a point to like and share this video feed so that your friends can join into the conversation. Also, if you have not done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook so that you can get all of the alerts. Make sure you make the settings so that you get our alerts so that when we go live, so that you can be a part of the conversation, well, as we're having it. Also, want to remind you guys, please remember to support fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. You go to FPC Gear, you can find all sorts of very cool t-shirts. So please go there. Know that every t-shirt that you buy, the proceeds will also go right back into the fight. It'll go right back into helping our battles in the court. It'll go right back into our battles in the state legislature. Wherever we're fighting, that's where the resources will go. So please go there, check them out. We got some really cool designs. We're trying to add new ones all the time. So if you've been there but haven't been there recently, please check it out. Also, want to remind you guys, we still have our ghost gun ban fight going on. We're raising money right now in order to stop the new ghost gun ban bill, the bill that basically would require background checks for all firearm parts because they don't want anybody to be able to build ghost guns out of ghost gun parts, precursor parts, or as I like to call them, dingle squats, because there's no such thing as precursor parts. But hey, I figure might as well call them dingle squats. Anyway, having said that, we're fighting the bill. We need your help. Please donate to help us. In order to encourage you to donate, we are giving away one of 4 CNC machines for those of you who are interested in building your own ghost gun. So please go ahead and do that. We're giving away 4 of them. The contest is going on until the 15th, so you need to make sure you enter to win. Now, I always say this, you do not have to donate to enter, but you do have to enter to win, so you still got to follow the link if you want to be able to get one of these machines, or at least if you want to enter for the chance to win one of these 4 machines. And while you're there, hey, why not drop off a few bucks in order to help in the fight for our rights? So please remember to do that. Contest ends on the 15th. All right, moving right along. They say, so goes California, so goes the nation. And nowhere is that more evident than when it comes to legislation, in particular bad legislation, especially when it comes to firearms. One idea that is being pushed by a Democrat there in the state of all states, North Carolina. Now, this is a bill that's being pushed by a Democrat, an Orange County Democrat. Now, California, Orange County is relatively conservative, so it's interesting this is an Orange County Democrat in North Carolina. Her name is Verla Insco, and she is introducing a bill that will institute a California-style not unsafe handgun roster. That's right, we call it the not unsafe handgun roster here in the state of California. And here is, in essence, a real brief history of what the not unsafe handgun roster is. It was started originally as a roster that was designed specifically to help weed out Saturday night specials. So you wouldn't have guns that would explode in people's hands, or if you dropped it, it would fire, all of that. So all firearms would be required to go through a certain basic testing in order to make sure that it is at least safe or not unsafe, because California politicians could never dare to call a firearm safe. So what would happen is the manufacturer would have to submit it to the list. They pay $200. It's tested and all that. And if it passed the test, then it was put on the list of firearms that are not unsafe, thus approved for sale by retailers in the state of California. This was how it was sold initially, and it got support on both sides of the aisle, even though a number of groups basically said, look, they're eventually going to utilize this to ban guns. Now, FPC was not around at that time. Otherwise, that's exactly what we would have said. But that's in essence what a number of firearms groups that were around at the time were saying. But they were like, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're not interested in banning guns. We just want to make sure that these cheap guns that are out there that are bad guns that could potentially hurt somebody, well, we want to make sure those are no longer on the market. And the bill passed. Now, mind you, as far as I know, I was told. So, once again, this is hearsay. None of the firearms that were available for sale in the state of California, none of the model numbers, at least none of the models that were submitted, failed the test, any of the tests that went into determining whether or not something was a quote unquote was not an unsafe handgun. But then a few years later, a test balloon was floated. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to say, well, we want to protect people who have guns. And, gosh, so many accidents happen because they don't know if the gun is loaded or not. So let's do this. Let's require that every firearm, in order to be added to the list, or in order to even be considered for the list, has to have a loaded chamber indicator and a magazine release. Now, what that would mean is the load chamber indicator would tell you there would be some sort of an indicator on the firearm that would tell you whether or not there was a round in the chamber. And the magazine release was such that if in the event that the magazine was not in the firearm, where you could mistake that, some people mistake that if there's no magazine, then it must not be loaded. Well, if the magazine is out of the gun, well, then the gun cannot fire. So those became requirements for new firearms in the state of California. Now, these had nothing to do with whether or not these were safe handguns. These were features that were now going to be required on all new model handguns. And as bad ideas do in the state of California, it passed. And therefore, a lot of manufacturers who weren't interested in doing this or providing these, in essence, none of their new model handguns were made available for sale in the state of California. Now, mind you, if you already had one that had already been approved, then you could keep selling that old model handgun. But if it was a new model, if it was new and being introduced, at this point, now it had to have loaded chamber indicator and the magazine release. Well, then came along micro-stamping, and this is when things really got interesting because the California legislative bill didn't just require micro-stamping in one place. It required micro-stamping in two places on the shell casing before when the shell was ejected, and this is for all semi-automatic handguns. So the challenge with this was multi-phase. Number one, no one was doing micro-stamping. And in fact, it specifically said that when the technology is available and public, then this will become a requirement on the roster. Well, eventually, it was created and someone had a patent on it. When the patent ran out and went to become public, well, an organization known as the Handguns Foundation, very good friends of ours, they actually, a representative from there actually went and bought the patent for another period of time, and delayed the implementation of this particular law. But eventually, it in fact did become fully implementable, which meant that any new handgun, any new model handgun, could no longer exist in the state. Was no longer going to be for sale in the state of California unless it had this technology. Now, mind you, manufacturers have said while they can do micro-stamping, they cannot do micro-stamping in two different locations on the fire. There's just no way, in particular with the firing pin. They also talked about a number of the issues relating to doing micro-stamping. One of which being that you're going to have a whole different setup. Even if it was just one, you're going to have a whole different setup in order to produce California firearms than you do the firearms for the rest of the country. It just didn't make any sense for them to be able, any financial sense for them to be able to do that. But even with all that, they still can't do micro-stamping in two places. And anyway, that's what they were saying. So what we've seen happening in the state of California is something that's very interesting, and that is, in essence, the roster of semi-automatic handguns that are available for sale in the state of California has gone down dramatically. I mean, it is crazy how, not crazy, but what's in essence happening is that it's turned the roster into a de facto ban. And here I'll show you this real quick. that we're dealing with here in the state of California. Like I said, if you change a spring, if you change who supplies the spring, if you do change anything that even if it doesn't necessarily change the function of the firearm, it is now considered a new model firearm and therefore has to have microstamping, has to have a loaded chamber indicator, has to have a magazine release. And if it doesn't, it cannot be considered for sale in the state of California. And so as a result, we've seen a significant reduction in the number of firearms that are available for sale. And this right here, what you're looking at is a graph. A graph that we had, that the Handguns Foundation had put together, and really to kind of point out the direction based on all of the leading information that we had in regards to what firearm sales were going to look like, or what semi-automatic handguns and that is exactly what it is. I mean, think about this. If you have a technology, right, if you were to require for any car that is going to be made available for sale in the state of California, it has to be able to fly. All right, so let's say that. Oh, no, it has to be able to run solely on water. All right? Now, if there were no manufacturers who made a car that ran solely on water, right, would you then not be creating a de facto ban on all new model cars in the state in your state? Well, yes, of course you would. Because if it's not available for sale, and if it's not available for sale, well, then it's not available. And there's actually a case. It's called Pena v. Lindley, and I've put the link to the Ninth Circuit oral arguments. I put a link to that in the description of this video. It's a little long. It's 44 minutes, but I'm telling you, it's worth watching because it's interesting the way even some of the justices in this thing were raising the question. First and foremost, they noted, well, the Second Amendment applies not to the firearm, but to the individual and the individual's right to be able to keep and bear arms. In particular, when you look at Heller, and it talks about a firearm that is safe and in common use. Well, these firearms, most of these firearms that are being banned in the state of California are safe and in common use in every other state in the country. In every other state in the country, these firearms are safe and in common use, but not in the state of California. In essence, in the state of California, it's almost like while everyone else is watching 4K, flat panel, high definition TVs, we here in California are stuck with tube TVs. And even though people may be producing those tube TVs, if they change one part in that tube TV, then eventually they're not going to be able to sell those TVs anymore. And once they've eliminated every possible new model of tube TV, well, guess what? There will be no TVs for sale in the state of California. And that's exactly what this bill is, and that's exactly what's being proposed in the state of North Carolina. Folks, I cannot even begin to tell you how bad an idea these things are. Once again, in essence what is happening is you have folks who have decided, they've decided that they're going to go around Heller. Heller means absolutely nothing to them. They have decided that you may have a right to own a firearm, but you don't have a right to buy one. And you certainly don't have a right to buy one of your choosing. And by the way, you don't have the right to buy one that is not regulated by somebody who knows absolutely nothing about firearms. In fact, we're going to require a technology that doesn't exist And we're going to require you to buy firearms that have that non-existent technology, which means the firearms are non-existent, which means these are truly the ghost guns, which we seem to be passing laws against too. I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't get it. But folks, this is an important one. You know, for those of you who are there in North Carolina or in other states who are watching this, you want to watch those oral arguments. They are getting dangerously dangerous. Well, not dangerous. They've way overstepped the line. Places like California, their attitude is screw the Constitution. We're going to do what we want, and we're going to make them, you know, work around us. We're gonna make the Supreme Court shoot us down, and that's what's. And then the circuits like the Ninth Circuit just play into that because it is so overwhelmingly left wing, and then the Supreme Court, because they won't take up any darn cases, they help out. They co-sign on some of this stuff because they're unwilling to step up and have something to say on these cases. And I'm almost certain that Pena v. Lindley is going to Lindley is going to make it to, is eventually going to wind up, at least it's going to wind up being, it's going to wind up, we're going to at least be looking to go to the Supreme Court, whether it's us or whether it's the state. Somebody's going to be asking the Supreme Court to review it. And I gotta believe that they gotta hear this one. But then again, you never know, because they haven't heard a case since McDonald. I mean, that's how long it's been since they've heard a case dealing with the Second Amendment. Anyway, folks, like I said, we can't make this stuff up. And the oddest thing is that this is something that's being proposed in the state of North Carolina. Now, it is being proposed by a couple of North Carolina Democrats. So who knows? Maybe this idea will be DOA. At least let us hope so. Anyway, folks, thank you so very much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being a part of the fight for our civil rights. Remember, got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.